Working hard in the gym and eating well are only two parts of the complicated process of building muscle. The three main mechanisms of muscle development were traditionally thought to be mechanical tension, metabolic stress, and muscular injury, but more recent research has provided additional insight into these processes. Let's start by looking at the idea of muscle damage. In the past, it was generally believed that pain and some swelling in the muscles following an exercise were signs of increased muscle mass. However, recent research has shown that these immediate signs of injury do not directly contribute to the development of muscles. Rather, during the recovery period, when the muscles are healing and adjusting to the pressures put upon them during exercise, muscular development takes place. With these results in mind, the emphasis has moved from purposefully inflicting severe muscle damage to enhancing the healing process. The ability of the muscles to mend and strengthen has a key influence on how well we sleep, eat, and live our lives. This knowledge throws doubt on the idea that the primary goal of an exercise should be to maximize muscle injury. Moving on to metabolic stress, it was once thought that the accumulation of chemical byproducts and the consequent burning feeling felt after intense workouts were crucial for muscle development. Recent studies have nevertheless revealed that high metabolic stress training techniques, such as short rest intervals and high repetition sets, may not be as helpful for muscle development as previously believed. In fact, it has been demonstrated that longer rest intervals and avoiding total muscular exhaustion produce greater outcomes in terms of muscle hypertrophy. This paradigm change raises the possibility that metabolic stress principal function may be to trigger other critical procedures, such as the release of hormones and growth factors that help in muscle development. Even though metabolic stress still has a part in a successful training regimen, it shouldn't be the only thing you concentrate on if you want to optimize muscle growth. However, mechanical tension has been shown to be the most important factor in promoting muscle development. The force and strain applied to the muscles as they stretch and contract against resistance during exercise is referred to as mechanical tension. The muscle cell's chemical pathways are activated by this strain, signaling the requirement for development and adaptation. People are recommended to concentrate on lifting bigger weights and using their whole range of motion during workouts in order to produce more mechanical tension. This strategy makes sure that the muscles receive the stimulus they need to develop. A key idea in using mechanical tension for the best muscle growth is progressive overload, which includes progressively increasing the resistance over time. Here are 4 adjustments you should think about making in order to maximize your exercises for muscle growth. 1. Preserve the perfect technique by not skipping reps, controlling the weight throughout the eccentric period, and refraining from utilizing momentum. To provide the best mechanical strain on the muscles, pay close attention to good form. 2. Focus on progress rather than discomfort. As you gain strength, concentrate on gradually increasing the weight and reps on the same exercises rather than continuously switching activities to cause stiffness. 3. Establish a mental and muscular connection. Concentrate on deliberately contracting the target muscle throughout each rep to improve the muscle's sensation and activation. Increased muscle growth may result from this, especially in the upper body. 4. Rest strategically. Give yourself enough time to recover between sets, aiming for at least 1.5 to 2 minutes and longer for difficult compound movements. This improves recovery and increases mechanical stress in the following sets. You may improve your training for optimum muscle growth by incorporating these adjustments into your workout routine. Remember that developing muscle requires patience and consistency. Therefore, be sure to maintain good form at all times. That's all for now. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more helpful information. Share it with your friends who might find it useful. Also, feel free to check out our other videos and playlists for more great content. If you have any suggestions or feedback, please let us know in the comments section below.